Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Junaid Ashraf, and I am the co-founder of the Scottish Asian Business Chamber. We're a membership organisation supported by the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce that advocates for the voices of minority ethnic-led business owners in Scotland. And we do this through a mixture of policy engagement, hosting regular networking events, and asking our members how we can best support their sector with any issues that they're facing. Apologies for that. Now, I love what I do, but that's actually not my day job. So my day job is actually I lead engagement for Macmillan Cancer Support for all of Scotland, speaking with people affected by cancer and using that knowledge and insight to improve how we as a charity and the NHS support people living with cancer. And I love that job too, and I do them both. And it's my hope today to share some insight into my career on the subject of community so that you can find a career path that you will love too. I can tell you that putting yourself out there, getting some experience and networking to find your opportunity and discover your passion is the way to go. And to be honest, most of that is pretty much all you need to do to go on your way. But I understand how daunting it can feel to have your whole life ahead of you and feeling uncertain about it. That you might not have any control over where your career path may take you, or even worse still, that perhaps you're unsure about what your so-called passion may be. But I think the best thing I can tell you is that most of us, if not all of us today, including Richard and Rook and Murray, who I think had missed his talk this morning, is that we've all been where you've been. What's exciting about being at university at your age, or I'm only 27, so I'm about the same age as you guys. I hope you think the same. Is about you've not really begun your journey, and that the whole world is really at your feet. And you can almost literally be anything you'd like to be. But an important question that I found myself in my sort of short career trajectory is not who I want to be or what my job role is, but rather what is the impact that I would like to see on the world around me. My career path doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and I'll go into that in a minute. But by choosing to focus on what has interested me rather than following a name, a title, or the money, has given me a fulfilling career path that I've enjoyed for the last 7 years, whilst having a positive impact on the world around me. I've led the most ambitious race equality action plan for any local authority during my time as a councillor in North Lanarkshire Council. At my role at Macmillan, I'm leading the largest investment into non-clinical support for underrepresented communities affected by cancer in Scotland. And through the Scottish Asian Business Chamber, we are supported by the largest chamber of commerce in Scotland to build a structure to give a voice to minority ethnic communities who are disproportionately more likely to own their own business, but may not have a voice in the wider business community. So, personally, I had a lot of trouble and difficulty really getting together my words and my thoughts to really communicate to you as people at university studying about how do you really figure out where do you want to go in life? How do you find the career that you'd actually want to really be passionate about, that you're happy to tell people about, that you feel confident in, that you feel passionate? And I've very much watched what Richard said, what Brooke has said, and reflected on that, I think although we've ended up in different places, I feel as if we've all actually had quite similar sort of experiences. So with my own background, I actually went to university to study mechanical engineering for no other reason than I like maths and physics, and I went to something called the Scottish Space School for a week where we got mentored by astronauts from NASA who came over from America to teach us about aeronautical, biomedical, electrical engineering. So I had no clue what I really wanted to do. I just picked a degree and ran with it. I did my first year, I did my second year at university, and then decided to take a year out simply because my younger brother, who was studying maths or actuarial science, didn't think he felt confident enough to apply for a job in his field. So I applied for a job in this field to show him how it worked, ended up getting an interview back. Pay sounded pretty good, so I took a year out basically and just started working at this actuarial firm. During that year, I travelled to about 6-7 different countries for various different random programs to do with the environment, to do with religion, to do with understanding Britain and its relationship with the European Union. And at the end of that year, I ended up actually running for local council election, which I'll get into how I ended up there. And so yeah, I was an engineering student working as a politician at university, did my third and my fourth year, and then still had no clue what I wanted to do. Did I go into finance? Do I actually get a job in engineering? Could I do something completely different? And I was kind of frozen, so I actually decided, you know what, we'll just focus on the politics. So I was 23 years old at the time and thought, let's figure out what I can do here. So 6 months later, COVID happens. So I'm sitting at home, figuring out what I can do, getting involved in local community groups, trying to support people with food parcels, and really trying to figure out how I can give back to my community. And it was about then where I launched a website called The Melting Scot, which was to advocate and kind of give a space for minority ethnic voices in Scotland and their experiences to do with the environment or to do with politics or to do with sports or whatever, many other range of other different things. And after that, I ended up a strategic partner with the Scottish Government. You know, it was a small sort of like community engagement role, effectively, you know, an entry-level role. But I felt very passionate about this because it was about the same time as the Black Lives Matter movement, and my race and who I am as a minority ethnic citizen in Scotland became a lot more in focus for me as somebody involved in politics. So that's all just, you know, different random trajectories just going in different directions, but I feel as if I can probably distill my advice probably into 3 different areas, which is first, perhaps opportunity. So looking at opportunities and just throwing yourself at anything out there. You know, I played bagpipes for 5 years, I did clarinet for 6 years, I went to the Air Cadets, I went to the Army Cadets, I did the Scouts, I played badminton, I played basketball, I played football, and quite frankly, none of those things stuck. You know, the thing that ended up sticking for me was actually youth work and getting involved in youth engagement and going to, you know, residentials, speaking to other young people, and learning about campaigns that we heard about, you know, about the environment or to do with equalities work. And that's what stuck for me. Perhaps one of the other many things you ended up getting involved with could have stuck for me. But I think taking a step back from there, perhaps an issue that a lot of people in university face right now is that perhaps you don't actually know what you're interested in, or you don't know what your passion is. And to be honest with that, I would say just try anything. And if you don't think you can try anything, then if you've got a friend who's interested in something, just go along with them and figure it out. Because I did something similar. I had a cousin of mine who was interested in some community group called the Scottish Police Muslim Association. It was about getting involved in community groups and teaching them about policing, and we're about 16 years old. I'm like, why are you involved in this? And I think this feeds into the second point that I have, which is to do with networking. So having got involved in this community group thing, you know, we ended up having exposure in a meeting with the US Embassy and the US Consulate. And through that, I learned from the leader of this group that whenever you meet with somebody who's interesting or important, you know, everybody go see Richard in a minute, you know, you should get their business cards, because there's something about like 90% of people who give out business cards, nobody ever actually gets in touch. And this individual who we'd met with the US Embassy got in touch with the team, said, I'm really interested in what you're doing. Is there any way I can get involved? And this guy was about 22, 23 years old. And they actually came back and said there's a trip going to America for 2 weeks to basically learn about between the UK and the US. And off of that, he gave me it. He said what he'd done, explained to me, and I thought it was really insightful that he emailed them and got them back in touch. I ended up getting not free trip, a paid trip, basically, to go to America for 2 weeks. And off of the back of that, learning that sort of structure, I started just emailing everybody all the time. You know, off the back of that, I ended up going to Morocco for the COP22 conference because there was a charity that was apparently interested in going there. I ended up going to Rwanda with the Church of Scotland because they wanted to send an interfaith group. You know, I ended up going to Germany and Belgium because I was at university and got involved in Islamic society group work, and people were interested in basically perhaps taking a delegation there. There's a lot of these little random opportunities which are around there, which I think is the first point I was making, which is opportunities are out there and you need that exposure. Just go do random things that interest you, that you find fun to do, and through that, somebody will be doing something interesting in those circles that you can find out. That feeds into the second point, which is about networking, which is when you're in these circles to not be passive, which is to actively go out and network, speak to individuals, interact with them, you know, make yourself seen and heard within the room. You know, the way that Brooke was talking about how she went out and talked about work experience opportunities where she talked to an MSP and you reached out. By doing these tiny little actions, what you might just think are kind of stupid or silly or who's going to email me back, that tiny little doubt in your head is what's stopping you from having an amazing opportunity like Brooke has had. A single email has led to her becoming a counsellor. Likewise with myself, you know, getting involved in my local branch. You know, you just talk to your MSP, you talk to your counsellors around you, you can end up in that trajectory. And that's just only one chapter of my story. And I think perhaps the third and last thing is to do with consistency. But consistency not meaning, when you're at university, you freak out a lot thinking, for example, somebody here studying law, I need to get a summer experience program, and from the summer experience program I need to find a summer traineeship, and off the summer traineeship I need to find a traineeship, and off the traineeship I need to get into associate level, and from that I need to become a newly qualified, and that's my 10-year trajectory plan sort of like mapped out for me. I think for consistency for me is that just by utilizing the experiences that you've taken on board from whatever you choose to do, just have fun with it, and from having fun with a project it can lead to something that's bigger. So to give you an example is that I'd been involved in the youth parliament and youth work because it was just something locally happening. That happened in about 2011 to about 2013. I was involved in that. And like 5 years later is when I got interested in politics. I ended up running as a local councillor. If I hadn't been involved in just youth work and youth politics things, I wouldn't have had the experience to be involved to run as an elected councillor. I had an interest in creating that youth blog for minority ethnic communities. It was COVID, couldn't do anything. Sounded like a nice idea, why not do it? Did it for about a couple of years. We had about 40, 50 blogs that we did. And off the back of that experience of having created a community and really focused on how do I involve with minority ethnic communities, just off a random idea I had, is that 2-3 years later, when we approached the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce to say we want to create a business idea where we're engaging with all businesses across minority ethnic, owners, of shops, takeaways, GP practices, medical owners, medtech companies. I mean, it's a pretty big jump from just a blog online to saying I want to advocate for all businesses, but it's effectively the same skill set. I just had something experienced in the background that I found fun and interesting. And perhaps even just like the fact that I'd taken on that engagement role was effectively a role which was entry level, but I'd been at a university for about 2 years. I'd been a councillor for 3 years. I'd led huge projects, but I took on a job that I found interesting to do with community engagement. And off the back of that, from the experience I'd had from this relatively, job that I learned a lot from, but it wasn't like a high-level role that looked incredibly amazing or whatever. I was able to transition from there to leading engagement for all of Scotland for Macmillan Cancer Support. So I think there's a lot of apprehension when you're at university to really think about what the end goal looks like. And personally for me, what I think has helped me in my journey is just try out things, any random things. Don't stress about it, thinking about this needs to be the answer to everything that you're doing. If you do get involved in those circles, then to make sure that you're networking, you're being active in those circles, and then you're making your voice heard, and anything that interests you, you take a little bit of an additional step to see what else could be behind some closed doors that are potentially there. And then thirdly, in terms of the consistency, is it just keep going. Just keep going, just keep going. Things from 4 or 5 years ago that vaguely interested you might be of huge benefit to you now, and you'll slowly just take one step in front of another, building up your life experience, who you are as an individual, and from that, you slowly become who you are going to become and the impact that you're going to have in the world, and your journey is unique, and you'll end up where, well, that's the exciting part, right? You'll end up wherever you'll end up. But thanks so much for listening.